Hey everybody, it's Scott from Oak Ridge Community Church. Thanks for joining me for another edition of our Theology and Culture videos. We are doing part 2 of a look at basic stuff on understanding Bible translations. In the last video, we talked about the two main methods that are used in translating the manuscripts of the Bible into English. One was called the dynamic equivalent or thought for thought or phrase for phrase approach. We see that in certain Bible translations like the New Living. It's not necessarily word for word. They try to make it more easily readable while being true to the text of the scriptures. The other approach was the word for word approach. I would encourage you to watch the previous Theology and Culture video for the background on these. Now, what follows may seem trivial, but it's not, especially when it comes to some people arguing for more translation, certain translations being more literal than others, or that we are to use only one translation, for it alone is inspired by God and others are not. Keep in mind that many English translations do not match the number of Greek words found in our Greek manuscripts because they try to explain what the original languages of the Bible, and I'm specifically talking about the New Testament here, are saying. This shows that translation work is not easy. Here's what I mean. Just listen and consider the following. Depending on the Greek New Testament that someone uses, there are between 138,000 and 140,000 words. So these translators take these Greek manuscripts and the Greek New Testaments, and they try to translate this over into English. Well, when it comes to our Bible translations, we don't have, in some of the more well-known ones, between 138 and 140,000 words. We have many more. Let me explain. The New International Version, for example, the older edition had over 175,000 words in the New Testament. The English Standard Version has 175,599. The New American Standard, over 184,000. The King James, over 180,000. The New King James has 177,000, almost 178,000. And the New Living Translation has over 186,000 words. Now, the point is that every translation that is a good translation is trying to make the scriptures understandable while being accurate to the original text of the Bible. That's why you have sometimes more words, because they're trying to explain what the Greek text said. Another thing to note is that much of the translation work and the differences in those translations that we hold in our hands come from the fact that there are so many Greek manuscripts with portions or complete books of the New Testament. And in those manuscripts are different nuances and copying of words and such. In fact, there are over 5,600 Greek manuscripts, either of portions of the New Testament or complete books, or even in a few cases, in some cases, complete editions of the New Testament, dated back to the early centuries after the time of Christ. Think about this. Before Gutenberg invented the printing press, each copy of the Bible was done by hand, by dedicated scribes. And most of those took their work very seriously, and they did a very good job of copying. But remember, you're copying manuscript sitting here and trying to go line by line, word by word. It's phenomenal how these manuscripts are so accurate with each other, even going through over hundreds of years of, let's say one is written in 400 AD and you find another one that's written in 1200 AD, and the similarities are unbelievable. Why? Because there were scribes that took their work very serious. Some were sloppy, but for the most part, they worked hard at trying to be accurate in copying the words from one manuscript to another one. As we look at manuscripts, specifically of the New Testament as a rule, the older copies of New Testament books are considered better because they get us closer to the first century and the original writings of the New Testament. We do not have the original letters that Paul wrote. We don't have the original books that John wrote. But even when analyzing these copies, the older ones, we have to look at the quality of the work, whether they were copied well or were done in a sloppy manner. Manuscript copying is hard, laborious work. Now, translators today have more manuscripts to work with, but that does not make the task any easier. No matter the translation, the Koine Greek, the language of the first century in which the New Testament was written, is not spoken today. So trying to interpret it can be a challenge, and sometimes translators differ on the definition of words. That does not necessarily make the translation a bad or poor translation. There are good Bible versions out there that use both methods that we previously noted to do the translation work. And these are just some that I consider to be good. The list could be longer than this, but here's just a few that I think are well done. The English Standard Version, I think, is a good Bible. The New American Standard, the King James, the New King James, the Christian Standard Bible, the Lexham Bible, the NIV, the New International Version, not the 2011 edition. That was very bad. The New Living Translation and the New English Translation are good Bibles. Now, more could be added to that list. But those are a handful of ones that I consider to be, myself, good Bibles. I personally use the English Standard Version and the New English Translation, and I like the New Living Translation. But these other versions are good Bibles. But I want to share 3 thoughts in closing when it comes to discussing this whole thing about Bible translations, okay? Because some people really do get worked up over which translation of the Bible you're supposed to use. First is this: show a little grace to people who might use a different translation than us. I mean, we're talking about good translations, and unless we fully understand how translation work is done, textual criticism is done, that is determining the original language of the New Testament and then bringing it over into English. Unless we know how translation work is done, we need to show grace. All right? We're not all there's going to be Bibles that we're going to like more than others. Second is this: no matter what translation that you use, a number of critics will be out there who will, criticize whatever translation we use. You go to the internet today and find, websites that talk about every English Bible translation and show the errors and the faultiness of any translation. You can find those. So it's always going to be critics of whatever translation you use. Third is this: good translations teach solid doctrine. There are translations out there that have made changes in which the deity of Christ, the atoning work of Jesus, his death on the cross for us, and other key doctrines are downplayed. But good translations do not do that. They stay true to the text. They show us that Jesus is indeed God. They talk about the atoning work of Christ. They talk about the personality of the Holy Spirit. In other words, good translations teach solid Bible doctrine, and that is a key. So the 3 things again: show a little grace to people who use a different translation than us. Second, there will always be critics of whatever translation you choose. And third, good translations teach solid doctrine. Hey, thanks for joining me. Be looking for the next Theology and Culture blog. It'll be out shortly.